Hello, Pat. I don't want to
We gotta
do what I did the other day. Before the first version, I put all the camera up and everything. You know what? About halfway through the that's speaking. Let's see what the second go around. This is what I needed to
Are we ready? Yeah. Let's begin our session with prayer. Of our minds, and disperse from our souls the twofold darknesses into which we were born, sin and ignorance. You make eloquent the tongue of infants, refine our speech, and pour forth upon our lips the goodness of your blessing. Grant to us keenness of mind, capacity to remember, skill in learning, subtlety to interpret, and eloquence in speech. May you guide the beginning of our work, direct its progress, and bring it to completion. You, who are true God and true man, who live and reign, world without end. Amen.
So good morning. So last time we, come to almost at the end of the persecution. Not I was, doing what to you, but the persecution, the time of the persecution, what I do, I continue a little more time. So that was the Diocletian persecution. Just to sum up, the Diocletian was a very able emperor, of course, and he started his time 284. And he himself made the law that after 20 years of his rule, he will abdicate himself. And he did that willfully, without any outside force. And one of the most important reforms, I told you, that he divided the empire into two, East and West. And again, the East and West, for some practical reasons, administration, he divided into two, so altogether four. And there are now two emperors, one in the East, another in the West. And again, he appointed two assistants whom he called the Caesars. So altogether now four. Two emperors and two assistants, altogether four. These were the administrators of the whole Roman Empire. Even though there were four, Diocletian, he took the part of East, the province called Illyricum, as the emperor, and he considered to be the first among the four. So that was the system he introduced. And why I just insist this one, because this political event or a reform that had a tremendous influence in the church, in the sense when he divided the empire into East and West. So East and West. Okay, on the eastern side, there were many individual small Christian communities. But like for example, we can say Alexandria, Antioch, And then Constantinople, at that time that was not the name. Constantinople, its name was Byzantium. Yeah, that's from that, the word comes Byzantine. Okay, Constantinople. Then Jerusalem. Then say, for example, that Ephesus, Smyrna, all those Christian communities' name in Bible, comes to the part of East, and mostly now in the part of Turkey. Understand? And that part is called, that part at that time was called Asia Minor. Understand? Asia Minor. So when you read in the Bible, especially in Revelation, so to the churches of Asia Minor, there is a letter, no? The letter, the churches of Asia Minor, and he enumerates 7 letters. So church in Ephesus, church in so many letters there, 7. So all these come in the part of East, and in the West. Of course, the most important, the church community was Rome. Then again Lyons. Lyons means nearby, almost in France. Lyons. And in some, I think, especially in Trier, something like that, that was the Trier in Germany. So some of the, maybe, could be, when Constantine or Diocletian comes, some parts of Roman, western side Rome, some communities. And these communities were not so prominent, popular as the eastern. One was in Carthage. Carthage was, where it is? Carthage in Africa. In Africa. The present, I think, Tunisia, something like that. So there was another community. From where comes St. Augustine? Cyprian. No, you see, the great fathers of the West, most of them are very great numbers, like St. Cyprian of Carthage, St. Augustine of Hippo. These were the great saints and theologians of the Roman or Western church, and they are mostly come from Carthage. That means the African part of Western Empire. And this is Alexandria. Alexandria is African part of the Eastern Empire. You know that. Alexandria belonged to Egypt. And Egypt, as you know, that's a part of Africa, no? Egypt has 2 sides. Don't you know that? Mostly the Nile, the part of the Nile, that all belong to the African continent. But there is a small part of the Asian continent, and that is the Zion part. And for which, that was the part Israel conquered once. And then because of the international negotiations, Israel then gave back to Israel, to Egypt. Yeah, that part, the Mount Sinai and on those places. And that is simply a rocky, hilly area. But other side, the Nile plateau, that is really very fertile and very, very nice. The Cairo and all other part of, that's Nile. Okay. What I see, these churches, when it comes to, the eastern part there, these churches were called thereafter the Eastern churches. Then another name is Oriental churches. Eastern or Oriental. This is this is how, when we call, in the Catholic Church there are the Western churches and the Eastern churches. And We are going to see some of the very interesting facts now afterwards. So before that, let me finish. It's the persecutions, under Diocletian, we have already seen how did he persecute. And he really did not persecute when he became emperor. And he was a man of wisdom, and he tolerated Christianity even though the law was there for the Christian persecution.
Are you talking about Diocletian or what emperor are you talking about?
Diocletian. So he started the persecution. Only see after almost like when he started, it was very in 300. He started 300. He became 284 emperor. Look, how many years now? 16 years. He did not really persecute the church, and he was emperor for only 20 years.
So it's only the last 4.
Even the last 4 years, he did not persecute. For example, we see in 300, he issued a decree by which, that was the first trade. So he began to remove the Christians from his army. It is said that he had 2 advisors who were very influential to Diocletian, and they were very anti-Christian. And because of them, he began, these things. So in 300, he issued what's called the cleaning up of his army by removing Christians. And clearly he started the persecution in 303. And he was emperor for 305. Only almost like 2 years he persecuted the church. But that persecution was very, fatal. Why? Intense and very, very strong. And its casualties were, what's called untold, or it was so large. Because the Christians had an idea that this emperor is going to be tolerant, and they were least prepared. They were already, when a new emperor comes, they will be all with suspicion, looking into how he is going to react, Therefore, and they will hide, and then, they will, very safely follow. After some time, when he shows his nature, he is what's called a friendly man. Okay, people began to show up, Then he continued almost like 16 years without a problem. That means very clear that he is a friendly emperor. And then, all on a sudden, starts persecution means people cannot simply hide. There are already worshipping places, they constructed, and people are already known to people. Others, they were Christians. So it was very easy for others to show, these are Christians. So maybe the Diocletian persecution, was called, the most unpopular, because so many people were killed. And the most, I think, famous one is Saint Sebastian, Or Saint Sebastian. He was the head of the, not army fully, what's called his guards. Even he was a Christian already, and that's why he even tolerated Christians to become, the members of army and administration. That was his policy, the beginning. But later it's all finished, and then this is how he ended up in 305. And 305, he abdicated himself, and together with, there were, I told you, in east there are 2 and west there are 2. Okay? So he, from the east, he himself, he resigned from there, from he west. Then, so in the west, in the place of Diocletian comes another one who is called Constantine. See, Constantinus Chlorus. These are not, he is not very, it's not very important, don't worry, his son, his Constantine, he is very important. So, when Diocletian gone, comes another one is Constantinus Chlorus. Okay? And another one is, that is not, he is not in the east, he is in the west. I made a mistake. He became the emperor of the west because, together with Diocletian, in the west also the emperor resigned. So 2 of them resigned. From east, Diocletian. From the west, see Maximian. From the west, Maximian resigned. From the east, Diocletian. So instead of these 2 came new one. In the west, Constantinus Chlorus, I said, and in the east, another one was called, see, Galerius. So he became the emperor of the east, and Constantinus Chlorus became the emperor of the west. And of course, they both of them, had the 2 assistants. Galerius had, Licinius, and you don't write all these names, just want to say. And in the west, in the west, see Severus. These are some of the historical data, just want to say. So now, just we shall remove all these things and then, see, in east now, the emperor Galerius and Licinius. Okay? In the west, now it is Constantinus Chlorus and Severus. Okay, now it is clear. After Diocletian left, then this man, died soon, and he became the emperor, and he has an assistant called Maximinus Daia. What happened here? This Severus was deposed by the resigned emperor. He was, Maximinus, I told you. Maximinus became, again assistant, to Constantinus Chlorus with his son. His son's name is Maxentius. Oh, these are all, these confusions. Then afterwards, now, in the east there are 2, Licinius and Maximinus Daia. In the west, Constantinus Chlorus and Maximinus. Maximinus. Now, he died soon, Constantinus Chlorus, and became Constantine, his son, Constantine. In 306. 306, this is the point where we have to come, Constantine. So from 306 onwards, Constantine is the emperor of the west, and his assistant, of course, he was his son Maxentius. So these are the 2 rulers of the west, Constantine and Maxentius. Here Licinius and Maximinus Daia. Now the problem comes. Constantine, of course, ruling the half of the Western Empire, and Maxentius. Now they began to have a problem, a war for power in the West. The Diocletian division and the four division and things did not going to work. Now in the West itself, they began to have a war between Constantine and Maxentius. Here comes the great conversion of Constantine. Constantine had a smaller army than Maxentius, and they began to, he marched to Rome, and he marched to Rome, and Constantine, his capital was Trier in Germany. You know that Trier and Aachen, that part was his place, while Maxentius took Rome as his capital. The others, Licinius, Illyricum, and Maximinus Daia, I think Pannonia, something like that. I don't remember exactly. Anyway, these began to, Constantine marched to Rome, in order to have a confrontation, and there occurred a famous war in 312. That is called the War of the Milvian Bridge of Rome. There is a bridge called Milvian Bridge across that river Tiber. And on one side, the army of Constantine. On the other side, the army of Maxentius. And now here is the great legend or historical thing, what we call a miracle happens that ended up in the conversion of Constantine. So it was almost like sure that Constantine is going to lose, because he had a very small army compared to Maxentius, and he is in Rome, Maxentius' place, for fighting. Now, when this is reported by two historians of his time, one is called Lactantius, who was the teacher of his son, Constantine's son, Lactantius. Another one is the famous Eusebius of Caesarea, who was the church historian, the first church historian. And he reports that, both of them, Lactantius reports in a very sober way, while Eusebius reports the incident in a very dramatic way. So the army was preparing themselves, and Constantine saw a vision, not in a kind of a dream, but he saw the soul, what's called the sun. The sun was around the sun. Of course, there was a kind of he had a vision that he saw a cross on the sky, and there was a sound telling him, in this sign you will win. And Constantine understood this is the cross, and he took this sign as a sign from God, and he began to draw sign of the cross on all the soldiers, the soldiers there. So that means he was going to fight in the name of Christ with a sign. While the other one, Maxentius, that was a practice every time in Rome, or in pagan world, when an emperor goes for a war, he goes to the oracle, no? And then get oracle whether he will win or not. So, and that was a very famous Delphi oracle of the past. So there were people who is called the divinizers, no? Who can tell the future. So this man went to the pagan god, made sacrifice, and then invoked the help from God, and they confronted in 312 October 28, and that in the war, even though Constantine had a lesser army, he won the battle.
Father, I have a difficult time embracing the term oracle. Does that refer to the vision, a person? What does oracle refer to?
That is a kind of what we call, even now there are people, what we call the divinizers, or people who are dealing with the spirits. That means there are temples in which there are priests. Not all the priests, but some priests are having this power, they say, and the emperors or people go there and then ask, so what is going to, I'm going for a war, what's going to happen to me, so I will win or not. He will have a little bit time of I think conversation with the spirit, then he will what's called prophesize, yes, you are going to win the war. And many times won and many times did not win.
There was 50-50 check.
Yeah, there was a 50-50 chance.
So, Father, is the oracle the player or the temple?
The person.
Or
What
the person?
yeah, there was a person.
But oracle is person?
Oracle is a it's a temple.
The temple?
Yeah, in which there will be people, priests like the prophets like people.
So we say the Temple of Delphi normally, but Father
Yeah.
saying the Oracle of Delphi.
Yeah, oracle means I think the one who says. The temple of Delphi, in which there will be a person who is telling it. Oracle means I think who foretells something.
I
Yeah.
think some of the confusion is I forget where in the Old Testament they refer to oracles.
The one who prophesies. Yeah. I think the temple of Delphi, or temples, the what's called someone who foretells the future or the will of God. That man is called, or that act is called oracle.
I believe, Father, that based on that story, there's a group from the nation called Sigma Chi or something like that. They have I see it in cars. They have a shield on the cross, and it's all based on this story of Constantine.
I think there are so many. I don't know whether you are not.
That's true.
Are you familiar with these things? I don't know. There is a world of trade going on everywhere. Even now, not even now. There's a big trade. I know when I was studying in Rome. After I think it was like maybe there are even the TV channels. I've seen so many times that it's at night time when for example there are priestess or priests, and these things are mostly women. The priestess, so having a ball in her hand, and then some kind of magic and things like that. There are so many even now here everywhere in the world. Okay. What is important is Constantine had a victory over Maxentius in this battle, and Eusebius dramatically narrates this thing. But Lactantius, who was the teacher of the son of Constantine, who was living in court circles, that means in the court circle, he reports in a very mild way that Constantine had a vision in dream, and asking God, Christ, or an angel appearing to him, and then asking, or some kind of sound or some kind of inspiration he had, and asking him to put the sign of cross on the shields of the soldiers, and which he did, and with that he won the battle. While Eusebius makes big thing, because that is that the sign appears on the sky, and a big sound, and the sign all the soldiers saw but the sound only Constantine, and that was something great. And already because the sign there, all the soldiers saw, and they began to believe, and then in the name of Christ, with the sign of cross, they fought and won. And what happened? What was the ultimate, the result of it? Constantine becoming Christian. Even before that, of course, when his father had a very tolerant attitude towards Christians, his mother Helena, she was a Christian already. His sister, whose name was Anastasia, was a Christian. And as I told you, Lactantius was a Christian, and Constantine appointed a Christian as a teacher to his son. That all shows that he had a very favorable attitude towards Christianity. And this 312 case that really sealed his life and then changed his life, and he became a true Christian, even though he received baptism at the end of his life. But he became a Christian, truly Christian, in 312.
Can you give us a perspective of the population in this area? How many are Christian at that time?
At that time, Christians maybe even less than 5%, maybe. But one thing was clear: Christians were becoming more, and increasingly, the people who began to have a kind of feeling that Christians are going to have an influence. And some historians say that Constantine sensed that the increasing power of the Christians, and now he switched to that. Some historians say, but the power of Christians was not so countable at that time anyway, compared to the pagans anyway, no. But this was a turning point. We cannot simply explain without the divine intervention. Truly it is.
5% is a very small minority.
I mean, that 5%, just my guess. I did not look into exactly how many percent was there.
What was the end of the Roman Empire?
And?
The end around.
Oh, that continued and continued, the western part, was taken by the Germanic tribes and, began to disintegrate. And already in 600 onwards, a new kingdom began to appear that was called, the Frankish kingdom on the west. While on the east, it continued again, some more time. And I think that was the fall of the Constantinople to the Turks. That was in 1400, something like that. That was the end of the Roman Empire.
But by that time, the remaining part was Byzantium, right?
Yeah, that was already Eastern. That was considered to be the Eastern Roman Empire continued as called, Eastern Roman Empire. But the West was already lost. The West lost, I think, 600 onwards, because it was all invaded by the Germanic tribes. And they began to, constitute their own small kingdoms.
I thought it was 454.
Something like that, yeah. We will have, maybe after that, it's a little bit more.
That's when Rome was sacked.
That was Alaric and, the Huns, no? Yeah.
450.
Yeah, for sure, the Constantine's victory on that battle gave a big impact on all people. Both Christians and pagans, and then they switched to...
Yeah, we are going to see. Yeah, we are going to see a little bit more about that. Okay, with that now, Constantine is the emperor of the sole emperor, the one emperor of the West. There are no two emperors in the West. While in the East there are two, Licinius and Maximinus Daia. But the power equation changes now, no? The power. Only in the East, only in the West, there is one man who is in command of the whole Western empire, no? Then he wields the power now. While in the East, there are two. So, his words now becomes the ultimate word for the whole Roman Empire. So, in what happened in C, and then 313, this is the most famous thing what we call Edict of Milan. Edict of Milan. So, there was an occasion. Licinius and Constantine's daughter, that was arranged to have a marriage. Constantine's daughter was given to marriage to Licinius. So they came in Milan for the wedding together, two emperors. Constantine's daughter and the emperor was going to marry her. In which, so also the other emperor, Maximinus Daia, was there. So three emperors were there. Altogether they, signed an edict by which Christians were given freedom. So, see, that was the whole empire. Christianity was accepted as a legitimate religion with 313. Not only simply a toleration, but a legitimate existence. For example, some of the in the 313 edict, for example, so he says, for example, how by which Christians were allowed to have a public worship. Christians were given what's called the citizenship. Before that, when one is Christian, he is no more a citizen of the Roman Empire. He had no legal existence. Now everything was given. Even not only that, even a kind of in 313 edict, he gave some kind of a preferential treatment, even preferential treatment for Christians. So thus becomes Christianity not only, so that's why we say a turning point. Until 313, Christianity was a persecutor religion. Now 313 marks a turning point in which Christianity was considered to be a favored religion in the Roman Empire. But that doesn't mean official, no. At that time, of course, paganism was considered to be the official religion. But now Christianity has now a preference. And Emperor Constantine, of course, tried to give more what's called preferential treatment to Christianity. But the other two emperors, Licinius and Maximinus Daia in the east, they, of course, because of that whole of that edict, they accepted it, but not with the heart. So somewhere or other, little bit of persecution continued in the east again. They could easily manipulate things. For example, if somebody says something against Christians, not in the name of the Christians, but other way, so they manipulated somewhere or other to persecute Christians in an indirect way. But in the West, that became something unknown now. Another thing is, Constantine, in order to favor Christianity, what he did was, and here comes the importance of papacy now. He considered the Roman Pope or the Bishop of Rome, and until that time, all the bishops were considered to be equal, and nobody had special powers. Nobody was given special treatment. Of course, the Pope or the Bishop of Rome was considered to be the successor of St. Peter. He had some kind of a preferential treatment as a successor of Peter, the head of the College of Apostles. So Peter's successors, he had a kind of what's called an eminence, no? But that was not related with anything with jurisdiction. Understand what I'm saying? The Pope had, or the Bishop of Rome had, no jurisdiction. What do you mean by jurisdiction? Joe, can you just say exactly what is jurisdiction?
Boundaries.
We usually talk about power to do things. It's your,
Yeah, that is called jurisdiction.
who's the boss of the whole world?
Yes.
Nobody. Because there's a bishop in each of these big cities and he's the boss of his area.
That means not only is he the man who is the what's called the man who teaches faith and morality, but he has power, authority related with law. In the Diocese of Brownsville, for example, the Bishop Flores has jurisdictional power, means he can transfer priests, he can do this and that, and he has what's called the juridical power. And Pope at that time, or the Bishop of Rome, had the juridical power only within his diocese, that Rome. And all other bishops had their own jurisdictional power in their own areas. But now comes again a turning point in the history of papacy too. Constantine considered the Bishop of Rome as the head of the church and began to favor. So he began, for example, he gave first the authority to even most of the bishops, he gave civil authorities to bishops.
Who was the bishop at the time?
It was Miltiades, I think. Miltiades. When I think there were other, Constantine ruled almost like from 3. He died in 338, something like that. So he became the emperor 306, and almost like 30 years he was the emperor. So in between there were other bishops.
The rule of the 20 years also was moved out.
Was. That was already kept by Diocletian only. That's all. But the division east and west remained. Even though afterwards we shall see, even he had a war with Licinius and he became the sole emperor of the Roman Empire. Only one emperor. Okay, what I was talking, the Constantine began to favor the Bishop of Rome as the head of the church. And for example, he gave the Lateran, what's called the palace. He donated the palace of the Lateran at that time it is called. He donated that to Pope, and now that is what's called the seat of the Diocese of Rome. Which is the cathedral church of the Diocese of Rome? It is not St. Peter.
No, it's the Lateran Church, and Father's telling you about it. The Lateran was a family that was very, very rich.
Yes.
They had the palace.
And Constantine's wife was from them.
And guess whose feast day is today? The dedication of that church. The Lateran Church.
It is today?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
So, that Lateran, that's called the Palace of Laterani, that they call it. So, that was a big, family, and his wife comes from them, and it was a kind of a donation from his wife, and he gave it to the Pope.
And guess which parish is the Pope's parish?
And
That one right there.
and that became his office, Bishop's house. And of course, together with a big church was built by Constantine. That is there. Of course, that's renewed constructed again. But that the beginning of the church in the Lateran, that's called St. John the Lateran, the Basilica, St. John Lateran, and that was donated by Emperor Constantine.
Other question. So we know that the Pope from Peter, there's succession.
Yeah.
And then, so during Constantine's conversion and became Bishop of Rome, So,
Not at that time, no. Bishop of Rome became, from beginning onwards.
so he didn't became the
Who?
Pope?
That means, no.
Constantine was
Constantine remained emperor only. That means, there were bishops, as successors of Peter. After Peter comes Linus, and then comes, Anacletus, then comes Clement. So, one after another, there were popes, and most of them were, martyred during the persecution. Yeah.
for 300 over 300.
312, 13, something at that time. Even though people were martyred, bishops were martyred, there were another pope. There was another pope elected and then installed. The pope's succession was, that was, without interruption. It became. There were. But what I insisted, or what I told you, it was I told you, before the Constantinian turning point, all the communities could not relate themselves, because they were all under persecution, and all communities, a kind of what's called exclusive communities here and there, without much. Of course, they had a little connection between, and at that time, the question of jurisdiction there did not exist. Their primary question was what? Existence.
Staying alive.
Survival. That was not anything about, they had no chance of, who has the power, or Pope or another one. We see immediately after this comes those questions.
So here we are about 330, more or less. We have bishops, but we don't really have a pope.
We have the Pope, means, the head. I told you, as a juridical and what's called the whole of Christianity ruling, there was nothing like at that time.
Yeah, not as we know it today.
Yeah.
We don't even have a canon.
No. That means the canon of the Bible.
We have
Exactly, what we call, I told you, that was in 367. The first number, the canon of the Bible list came out. That's all already later.
So we're at the point where the church is about to
Consolidate,
to gel.
Yeah.
And begin as we know it.
Yeah, that's all. Church existed, what we call what's called a clandestine, or somewhere, because of the survival.
So when we trace the succession of the popes, we're really tracing the succession of the Bishop of Rome.
Yes.
Until he's,
Yeah, that's all. And see, that's why, I wanted to say, don't think, what the papacy is now was the beginning. No, there's a big historical evolution on that. But at the same time, I want to insist always, we have to say, there was a kind of a conscience from the very beginning of the church that the successors of Peter, they were the leader of the church. That's why whenever there was a problem, so people tried to get advice from the Bishop of Rome. Or the Bishop of Rome had a consciousness that he is leader of the church. For example, even though nothing to do with the jurisdictional power. For example, there is a beautiful letter from St. Clement of Rome, who was the fourth pope. After St. Peter, Linus, Anacletus and St. Clement. He was the fourth pope. And he noticed then in the church of Corinth, that is in the Eastern Empire, okay? Church of Corinth. We know Paul writing a letter to Corinth. So there was some kind of dispute and problems during the time of, he lived in between, I think he died in 102, the Clement. He was martyred in 102 and he was a slave. He was a slave and he became the pope. And at that time, to become a pope means invitation to death. Yeah, because he was the leader of the community, and Christians were persecuted here, without any, without any law. Anyone could be, and the leader was the first one to be persecuted. And when you become a pope, that means your destiny is almost clear, that you are going to be martyred.
Think of our cartels right now. If you're a police officer in Mexico in a cartel land, you're going to be there for about 3 days until you're dead. That's what Father's talking about.
So, see, and he saw that there was some problem in Corinth. He wrote a letter, and he says, "Oh, dear sons, be united." Like that, why? The Bishop of Rome wrote a letter to the community of Corinth, which is in another part of the world, the Eastern, because that kind of a consciousness that because seeing the situation there, the leader of the community, he intervened somewhere or other, at least not order but a plea. My son, don't do this. Follow the principles of Christ. The difference you understand. Not, I say you don't follow that. If you do that, you will be removed. At that time, the Bishop of Rome had no power like that. But a consciousness was there always, that he is the leader of the community. Okay. And now, after Constantine, see what we just something about Constantinian turning point. This is very important, very interesting to note some of the points of Constantine. You can see there are almost like 3 stages in the life of Constantine. The first part, he from 312 or from 306 onwards, he's becoming Christian. 3 stages means, first he becomes distanced from paganism. A kind of, for example, see, the first part we can see, he when going for the war, omission of sacrifice to the pagan gods, or then what is that?
Setting up in the next.
Okay. So, see, there is no special favors to Christianity, but he distances himself from paganism. So he refused to offer sacrifice to Hercules, who was the Roman god at that time, or something like that. In the second part, we can see, or in his life, some appearance of Christian symbols in his coins, not pagan symbols. So he slowly adapts the Christian symbols into his administration, appearing Christian symbols on the coins. Then after conversion, after 212. Another thing is, for example, he issued a letter by which, he restored all the property of the church, which were confiscated before the other emperors. So he began to restore, give back all the church properties. Another thing is, for example, even freed clergy so that they can, celebrate, their worship. They can celebrate worship service. Freed the clergy. And he did not insist the clergy to do the military service.
Could the influence of his mother,
Sure.
that was always there even before?
Even before. Another thing is, again, in the second part, we can see a full freedom of worship. He even encouraged people to come for the worship. And then, the bishops were given civil rights. What do you mean by bishop? He allowed or even asked the bishops to set up courts in which the disputes were heard and the bishop was the man who, decide on. And that had a what's called civil effect. Once a bishop, decides something on that, then the civil authorities accept that. So he began a new phase in that life. And then the third stage we can see he becoming very personal Christian. For example, these are some of the things very interesting. So he began to respect human dignity. In all his laws began to appear human dignity, a part of law. For example, he forbade the branding on the face of the condemned to forced labor. If suppose somebody was condemned to do forced labor, that means become a slave, then the first thing what he did, put a seal on his face. So made iron seal, put in the fire, and then put the seal on the face or on forehead, so that mark is forever. Putting a mark on a face of a slave, a human being. Because the slaves were not considered to be humans.
So he abolished that.
He abolished that. Another thing is, even he set up courts, presided by the bishops, and they can free the slaves. But he did not all on a sudden, abolish slavery, no. But at least, somewhere or other began to show the dignity. Another thing is, this is very important, in 321, he issued a law by which Sunday was declared a holiday. Wow. It was Constantine who started Sunday as a holiday, a civil holiday.
That's what the Seventh-day Adventists always say, that the worship day or the Lord's Day is Saturday until Constantine changed it.
And all Christians were, that is for the Jews. And the worship day for all the Christians, that was Sunday.
And we abolished that already.
No, I'm saying the Sunday was the worship day for all the Christians from the very beginning. And Constantine accepted it, made it as a holiday. Understand? Not holy, but okay, you understand the difference. For us it was holiday, a worship day, which was taken by Constantine and made it a holiday. Civil holiday. Because why? Because so that people can attend worship. And made as a Sunday as a day of obligation. So with the civil effects.
Father, but before that law, Father, the worship day
was always on Sundays.
Why are they saying that it's in
the Seventh-day Adventists are not Christians. They are following what's called the Jewish law. And for them it was, Sabbath day was Saturday.
They were not Christians at the time. They are, right?
Always be Jewish. Worship Christianism.
So they're following the Jewish.
Yeah. The Jewish tradition was always with the Sabbath. That was on Saturday. And the pagans, I think it was Thursday, something like that. Their worship.
Actually, I think at the height of the Roman Empire, there were 260 legal holidays, as opposed to today, there's 260 work days. Might have something to do with why the empire collapsed.
Anyway,
They were not all bad.
but this is something important, and the whole world now celebrates Sunday as a holiday, starting from Constantine. And why the whole world, including the Muslim world. For them, of course, they do not accept holiday. It's a holiday for them is Sunday, a civil holiday. but worship day for them, of course, is Friday. See, then another thing, we have to finish that. Another thing is, for example, see some other idea of the last will. Even at that time, when if you can write a last will by which you can donate your property to the church.
What, Father?
For example, practice of donating through the last will to the church.
Your will.
A will.
When you're dead, where's your money go?
Yeah. There was the practice, of course. They could, write the will at that time too, but could not give to church. And he made the law by which one can donate his own property to the church in order to encourage the church. And then see, another thing is in 319 and 20 he abolished the practice of oracle, considered to be a superstition. No more oracles.
Wow.
So another thing is, see, then every time, see, anyone, for example, he again, tried to impose laws. If anyone and forces Christians go for sacrifice, if anyone forces anyone to go for the pagan sacrifice, that will be considered a high punishable offense. So like that, it's very clear now, Christians are favored. And what is the net result? And not only that, in order to be a part of the administration, even though he did not make a law, he made it point that Christians were appointed on the key positions of all the empire. So now comes, everything turned upside down, now comes something for the public. Yes, if you want to be successful, you need to be Christian. And that changed everything. Now, at that time, until Constantine, the conversion was maybe individual. Now the conversion, not individual.
By masses.
Mass conversions. Because most of the people want to be successful in their life, want to be Christians.
Yeah, but the original Christians were really Christian by faith. This was up to date.
And that is the another problem now comes together with that. The problems began. For example, people becoming Christians without a real conviction, only for material things. Now comes the Constantine turning point. Of course, the church began to spread like anything. Began a new phase, but whether it was advantages or not, in number, yes, but in faith, that's a question. Because many, maybe majority became Christians. Now the majority of all the Christians, the majority are not convinced Christians. So when they became Christians without much conviction exactly, they bring everything what they had. So the practices, the beliefs, and all the mentalities, attitudes, everything, like now in the church again from 3:13 onwards, slowly what we see is an interesting point. A persecuted church became a persecuting church. Slowly, because church wanted to, church now in the highest position. Here is already in the power. Slowly, that is not immediately no. Slowly now we see the people attacking the pagan temples, attacking things like that. Slowly, a persecuted church becoming a persecuting church, and that we clearly witness in the medieval age.
We had done a series of talks about the the idea of the separation of church and state and the proper relationship of church and state. And one of the problems is, if by law everyone must belong to this church, then the church's role switches from evangelization to enforcement.
Of course, Constantine was a very, what we call an enlightened emperor. He never forced anyone to become a Christian. No. He never declared that Christianity, even though he really favored Christianity, he never declared Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. Never. He tolerated others. Tolerated, definitely. And when the Christianity became the official Roman religion, that was in 380 by Theodosius. Emperor Theodosius in 380 made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. Yeah. And that continued until I think in 1994, something like that. In Italy, the official religion was until 1994, something like that. The Catholicism was the official religion, and they abolished it now. Even though Italy is almost like 94, 95, 96% Catholics, but now Catholicism is not the official religion of Italy now. It's a secular state now.
Father, at what time did we start celebrating Mass in the form that we would recognize at this time?
We cannot, very clearly set a date for that. From the very beginning of Christianity, the celebration of the Mass, for example, first they celebrated with the Jews, the temple worship, they started. And we witness in the Acts of the Apostles, the celebration of the Mass, or people were expelled from synagogues. We see that. That means Christians participating in the synagogue worship. What they did was, they participated in the synagogue worship, the first part, that is even now taken in our Mass, that is the proclamation of the Word of God.
St. Justin, right? He wrote something?
Oh, many. So, and the first part is kept as the proclamation of the Word of God, that is taken from the synagogue worship. And the second part, that is the breaking of the bread, and that is a Christian, purely Christian. That is, they gathered in small houses and then made the breaking of the bread. And that is the breaking of the bread and communion. That is also clearly shown in the letters of St. Paul. In Corinthians, for example, very clearly he states. Then slowly what happened, they could not go to the synagogue worship. So the synagogue worship part they conducted in the houses themselves, in themselves. So they in houses they started the Word of God, proclamation of the Word of God, and then breaking the bread together in the houses. And that continued the whole time in persecution time, and now after when Constantinian turning point, now it is time for great worship time, because he encouraged it, and now the life coming new now comes all from 300 onwards. The liturgy becomes, even before that a little more slowly, but 300 onwards the liturgy becomes so what's called one of the most important aspects of life, the church life, and becomes more and more added with paraphernalia, with so many hymns and everything. So there is a very clear development up to now. Anyway, it is full-fledged as it is now. It is in the 4th century.
Okay, we talked about how there was a lot of independence, and the Bishop of Rome did not have authority beyond his area.
Yeah.
But that the churches spread throughout, that they worship in the same way?
No, that's what we are going to say next class. So, okay, correct. So, we are slowly entering to that part. Very good. That's a question, very good, we have to answer that. How? This is a very, we can say there are 6 families of liturgies. Different types of liturgy. 6 families. And the Catholic Church is a communion of 23 churches. So we are going to see that next class. Okay?
Question, brother, what year was the medieval period?